The Bible Treasury, New Series. N7. A monthly magazine of papers on scriptural subjects. Volume 27, Article 34, 1908 and 1909. Part 36 of 46. Studies in the Gospel of Mark. By W. J. Hawking. 36a. The pathway over the stormy sea. And straightway he constrained his disciples to enter into the boat and to go before him unto the other side to Bethsaida, while he himself sendeth the multitude away. And after he had taken leave of them, he departed into the mountain to pray. And when even was come, the boat was in the midst of the sea, and he alone on the land. And seeing them distressed in rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them, about the fourth watch of the night he cometh unto them, walking on the sea, and he would have passed by them, but they, when they saw him walking on the sea, supposed that it was an apparition, and cried out, for they all saw him, and were troubled. But he straightway spake with them, and saith unto them, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And he went up unto them into the boat, and the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves, for they understood not concerning the loaves, but their heart was hardened. Mark 6 verses 45 to 52, Revised Version. See Note. Note. 1. Tormented, McCL, toiling hard, TSG, laboring, JND. 2. Phantom, TSG, ghost, McCL. 3. Take courage, TSG, be of good courage, MCC1, JND. 4. Beyond all measure amazed, TSG, exceedingly amazed, McCL, exceedingly beyond measure astonished, JND. 5. With the help of, McCL, through, JND. See also Note 65a, page 256, W. Kelly's Exposition of the Gospel of Mark, 1907. The service of love to the famishing multitudes having been rendered, the Lord did what the disciples suggested he should do earlier in the day, verse 36. He sent the people away. But, first of all, he constrained his disciples to embark in the boat and to precede him in crossing to the other side of the lake near to Bethsaida. See Note. Note. This Bethsaida was the city of Andrew and Peter, situated to the south of Capernaum, and therefore not Bethsaida Julius in the vicinity of which this miracle took place, Luke 9 verse 10. There are some, however, who think otherwise, holding that Bethsaida Julius is the only town mentioned in the Gospels, and they translate pros, over against, instead of to Bethsaida, Mark 6 verse 45. End of note. An unwillingness on the part of the disciples to obey seems implied in the terms of the narrative, such as demanded a certain loving violence on his part to overcome. And from John 6, we learn what in all probability was the reason why the apostles needed to be constrained, or forced to put to sea. The miracle of the loaves had awakened great popular excitement in the desert place, and the multitude were desirous to take him by force and proclaim him the prophet and king of the Jews. The disciples had not sufficiently imbibed the spirit of their master to judge rightly of this momentary impulse, and they would probably have taken sides with the mob to place him on the throne of David. Jesus, therefore, sent them away, while he himself calmed the turbulence of the people and dismissed them to their homes before night came on. The Lord valued this ebullition of popular feeling aright. He would not receive honor from men, nor would he commit himself to man, for he knew what was in man. A year later, a crowd, not then of Galilee but of Jerusalem, would, he knew, follow him and cry Hosanna, blessed is the kingdom of our father David that cometh, while a few days later the same crowd would cry, Crucify him, crucify him. Messiah's hour was not yet come. The servant of Jehovah would not, therefore, consent to be hurried to the throne by the popular clamor. God in due time would give his judgments to the king, and then the anointed of the Lord would judge the people in righteousness and the poor with judgment, Psalm 72. For the moment, The marvelous multiplication of the loaves and fishes seemed most attractive to the indigent peasantry of Galilee, who were accustomed to earn their small morsel of bread by much sweat of the face. Jesus, therefore, seemed to them to be most desirable, a king after their own heart. But when they sought him the next day that they might exalt him, the Lord unveiled to them the secrets of their inner selves, saying, Verily, verily, I say unto you, ye seek me, not because ye saw the signs, but because ye ate of the loaves and were filled. John 6 verse 26. Because Jesus had so liberally fed the multitude, they were prepared to come in their zeal, and by force to make him a king. But the Lord would not take the kingdom from zeal like this. This could not be the source of the kingdom of the Son of Man. The beasts, Daniel 7 verses 2 and 3, may take their kingdoms from the wines striving upon the great sea, but Jesus cannot, Daniel 7 verse 13. This was not his mother crowning him in the day of his espousals, Song of Solomon 3. This was not, in his ear, the shouting of the people bringing in the headstone of the corner, nor the symptom of his people made willing in the day of his power. This would have been an appointment to the throne of Israel on scarcely better principles than those on which Saul had been appointed of old. His kingdom would have been the fruit of a heated desire of the people, as Saul's had been the fruit of their revolted heart. But this could not be. Prayer in the mountain solitude. The disciples having embarked and the crowds having been dismissed, Jesus departed into the mountain alone to pray. This reference is the second one made in this gospel to the prayers of the Lord. On the first occasion, we are told that in the morning a great while before day he rose up and went out and departed into a desert place, and there prayed, Mark 1 verse 35. This was in Capernaum at the beginning of his public ministry and was the sequel to a day of strenuous toil. The present occasion was after some 2 years of his public service had passed, during which the multitudes of Galilee had everywhere welcomed him and his preaching of the kingdom. But a change was now imminent. The evangelists unite to show us that at this juncture the spirit of envy and malice began to display itself more openly against Jesus. The opposition that had hitherto slumbered now awoke to a vigorous action which grew in intensity until it finally reached, a year later, the climax of the cross. In view of this definitive rejection by his beloved people, Jesus took up the burden of it upon his spirit before his Father. And may we not believe that as he most surely felt in the silent midnight the poignancy of a despised love, so the lonely mountain altar smoked with the fragrant frankincense of a submissive will, even so, Father, for so it seemed good in thy sight. It seems the way of the Spirit of God in the Gospels to give us momentary glimpses of Jesus such as these in order that we may see the historical fulfillment of prophecies which were given long before concerning the servant of Jehovah. These holy men of old were not silent concerning the apparent failure of the sent one of God when he should come to introduce Israel to the blessings of the new covenant. It was said that the servant would labor for the name of Jehovah, but that his assiduity would be in vain so far as outward result would manifest. He would spend his strength without stint, but for not in seeming effectiveness. The Messiah would come to gather Israel under his wings, but Israel would refuse to be gathered. Surely we see these things outlined in the praying Christ, and we see him there upon the mountainside learning obedience to the written will of Jehovah by the things he was suffering in his spirit. But after the long dark night comes the glad day. In those sacred solitudes, the blessed Saviour was wrapped in secret communion until the morn approached. The night watches were passing, the day would break, the shadows would flee away. The same prophecy that foretold failure also foretold triumph. But I said, I have labored in vain, I have spent my strength for naught and vanity, yet surely my judgment is with the Lord and my work with my God. And now, saith the Lord that formed me from the womb to be his servant to bring Jacob again to him, though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. And he said, It is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles that thou mayest be my salvation unto the ends of the earth. Isaiah 49 verses 4-6. There was thus a joyful issue set before the face of the Lord, and in the morning watch, he came to his disciples, walking on the sea. The distress of the disciples. A storm was no unusual phenomenon on the Sea of Galilee. Indeed, this inland lake was noted for the prevalence of violent tempests which arose with great suddenness. The apostles were natives of the surrounding districts and were therefore familiar with this feature. And those of them who had been fishermen must often have experienced similar storms in the course of their regular occupation. On this occasion, we are told that the sea arose because of the great wind that blew against them. The boatmen had intended to skirt the northern coast, but they appear to have been driven in the opposite direction towards the southern shore. Consequently, though they spent a great part of the night laboring at the oars, they made but very little real progress towards their desired haven, because they were pitting themselves against the forces of nature. And though they struggled zealously to gain their destination, they were no match for the opposing elements. There was undoubtedly a great tempest, but it is not to be gathered directly from the narrative that the apostles were in imminent personal danger. In the case of the storm recorded earlier in the Gospel, the waves washed into the boat, and the apostles felt themselves perishing when they aroused their master. Here it is not stated that the storm threatened to overwhelm the bark, though there must always be danger in an open boat with winds and waves running high. But we do read that the Lord saw the disciples distressed with rowing. Such was the particular difficulty of the moment. They had been pulling at the oars with all their might without making any headway. This was weary work, and dispiriting too. And yet had not the Lord constrained them to embark that evening? And they might have reflected that, in effect, it was He who had set them at this work of rowing in the teeth of a strong gale, and such a reflection would give rise to disparaging thoughts of Him. But was there not some ulterior purpose in the trying experiences of that night? Had not these fishers of men to learn thereby that there are times in Christian history when no fishing can be done, when no sail can be set to run easily before the breeze, when, in fact, every muscle must strain at the oar to keep the boat's head in the right direction and to prevent drifting, while no real progress seems possible? What the Lord was facing in spirit on the mountain top, the apostles were learning upon the stormy waters in a manner more suited to the measure of their understanding. The servants, like their master, were laboring in vain and spending their strength for naught. There was an essential difference, however, in the two cases. On the one hand, the Lord submitted to apparent failure in His service; on the other hand, the apostles lacked the needful strength to secure for themselves a victorious combat. The Lord forbore to exercise His power; His servants did not possess that degree of power which the occasion demanded. But before the morning broke, while they had proved their own insufficiency, they had also proved the almighty power of their Lord and Master to make them easy conquerors in spite of themselves.